Today, I want to tell you about Kim. Kim was sentenced to manslaughter. She served 17 years and was denied parole 5 times. But Kim's story is not that simple. Today, I want to tell you about Kim, the girl who just fell in love like anybody else. She fell in love with Sanders, but Sanders was not the person she thought she fell in love with. Instead, Sanders physically and sexually abused her almost every single day of her life. Sometimes he even abused her so bad that she had to go to the hospital. She had him arrested 5 times. And then one night, he came to her house and he knocked on her door. When she refused to not go with him, he dragged her out of her house and she went with him in the car. When she refused to have sex with him, he raped her. And that's when enough was enough for her. So she pulled a gun from under the seat and shot him. Today, I stand with Kim because Kim did not deserve to be incarcerated for 17 years. And this is why we need the Domestic Violence Survivor Justice Act. Today, I want to talk to you about 3 things: the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act, the exception under Jenna's law, and how can we as New Yorkers make sure to hold New York accountable for effective implementation. Finally, in 2019, New York State has had the chance to pass a humane law. The Domestic Violence Survivor Justice Act aims to sentence and resentence survivors with histories of abuse by either lowering their sentence or referring them to alternative to incarceration programs. In theory, the exception under Jenna's law is supposed to help survivors of domestic violence, but the exception fails to help them in practice. In 2007, the exception was not used at all. And when it was used, the person got 6 more years had they not used that exception. In order to make sure that the DVSJA does not suffer the same fate as Jenna's law, we must make sure that there is effective implementation. And that includes 3 things. First, we must prioritize domestic violence calls. There is little to no evidence on what happens when police officers arrive to the scene and what actually goes into that report. Too often, police officers come into a scene 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes after the domestic altercation happened, and they are left to assume who the survivor is and who's the harm doer is. And sometimes, these assumptions are wrong. Secondly, we need to train our judges and attorneys on what the DVSJA is. Judges know the law, but they don't know pathway theories. They don't know that these survivors would not normally engage in these activities if it wasn't for their trauma, if it wasn't for their abuse. And if attorneys are trained to be able to explain that in plain words to the judges, our survivors are going to have a better chance at reducing their sentences or getting referred to alternative to incarceration program. There is evidence that show in cases of domestic violence, women receive harsher sentences than men. Had the DVSJA been passed and implemented while Kim was incarcerated, maybe she would have had the chance to tell her full story. She would have had the chance to present evidence of her abuse. This is just the first step in changing the dialogue about domestic violence. But we have a long way to go.